Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Midhalla, which is brought to you by Fernwest Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and games usually run about 90 to 180 minutes. In Midhalla, you, the players, take on the roles of heroes, and together you will experience an epic campaign in a Viking fantasy world full of perils and adventure. It is a story-driven campaign-based dungeon crawler with tower defense elements and legacy-like progression. The game follows the story of Harkon, a newly trained Viking warrior, as he faces the invading demon hordes. At the core of Midhalla's gameplay is a strategic hero combat mechanic that eliminates randomness and focuses on complex strategy. You will invest resources to build traps between combat phases to prepare for the incoming waves of enemies. The game also features a story-based exploration system that allows you to follow Harkon's journey and unlock additional lore as well as new gameplay elements as you progress. The campaign and all scenarios are fully replayable with different classes, skills, events, and varying enemy setup. In each chapter of Midhalla, you explore a dungeon, which has been sealed with powerful runic energy to keep the demons from escaping into the world of the living. As part of your exploration, you will trigger encounters with enemies. You will have to defeat them, survive, and also prevent them from destroying the seal or the gate. If at any point all heroes are KO'd or the dungeon gate hit points have reached 0, you have lost the chapter. To win, you need to fulfill the chapter objectives, one of which is always to defend the gate. As you complete chapters, you unlock new ones and follow the Saga of Harkon campaign storyline. The campaign has a specific line of chapters, but there are also a number of free chapters which are optional. Join me as we dive into this world. Now, of course, the game has some basic setup you need to be aware of, but mostly you're going to first dive into the campaign book and determine where you are in the story, what chapter you're going to start with next, and so forth. There's going to be setup related to that, what monsters are going to be in play, which tiles you're going to be using, and just in general some various things for setup like items and so forth. But you're going to take your characters and set them up, and maybe you're just continuing your adventure, so you'll need to keep track of everything you've done as a party as you move through the game, and they have a handy party sheet for that. It is in the back of the book. I did not mark this one up because this is a prototype. I want to keep it clean for the next person who receives it. But this is a really handy guide to keep you up to date where you are, where you've been on the adventure, what characters you've unlocked, all kinds of great info here. So what you see set up in front of me is already hip deep in the chapter. This is the combat phase, which is phase 3, and is the tower defense part of the game. But first, how did we get here? Well, we have heroes, which you're going to pick, and the heroes are going to have abilities. So obviously we got to have Harkon. It is his journey after all. Then we have Innick that we're going to be using and helping along the way. You can play single player with 2 characters, or you could play 2 player, or even up to 4 characters in the game. And the game scales well with the creatures, how powerful they are, how much health they have, and so forth. So you'll keep all that in mind based on the player count. But the heroes are going to have markers showing which abilities they last used. So you've got standard abilities in rows 1 and 2, and then at the top you have your ultimate abilities, which don't get recharged till later in the round. But you have your health as well, and any items you may be carried over from previous chapters will be on these boards as well, which we have a couple here. Now, there's all kinds of different gear, different items that you're going to be getting through the course of the game, and it's just going to really add and build up your character. And these level 1 abilities that you see in the first row, you're actually going to have some divvied out to you as a pool to all the players to choose from. So you'll pick from that pool and then add them to your player boards, and so you can really customize the characters and where you're going with them and what abilities you want to engage with. All the enemies you see here are going to obviously be set up based on the chapter, but the ones that are in play, you'll see standees. Now again, this is a prototype, so keep that in mind, even though it looks kind of done and finished. And we have miniatures for our heroes. They sent me painted ones, which look fantastic. And you know what, there's also traps to put into play, which are also these amazing miniatures that you're going to put dice in that dictate how much health that particular trap still has. And you can upgrade traps as you move through the game, level 2, level 3, making them more powerful. Now, as far as engaging with and learning the game, it is so fantastic and straightforward. They have this handy reference guide, and a lot of games have reference guides. This one has your overview of your turns as well as all the keywords you need to know. So this card right here, you can play right off of. Just getting some basic knowledge from the rule book. This is very straightforward and leads you through what you need to do. So at the start of the chapter, several things to set up. You've got your dungeon in general to set up. You've got your main dungeon tile, which is going to show the gate and what its health is. You use the 20-sided dice, starting at 20, and then marking it down as it takes damage. And a lot of the enemies, that is their primary goal, is to go for the gate and take it down. Also, the main dungeon tile will have your main resources. It'll have your silver and your runes. You're going to be using those for items, which will be here as well. It might be some rare items you can tap into. If the merchant has already been found and put into play, you can buy items from the merchant and so forth. But here, you're going to be tracking those particular resources, which you can use for items, like I said, or for purchasing the traps that you really want to get as many traps in play as you can. So you'll spend those resources to do that, and obviously it's finite, but you can also get components that will allow you to upgrade your traps, giving them a level 2, level 3, just making them that much more powerful. So chapter 2 that I have set up here, your main goal, well, 2 goals. You always have the goal of defending the gate. But in this one, you need to help Dara find her merchant cart, which is going to aid you in the long run, having more items that you can access and buy more items. But Dara is definitely the key thing that you're after as you move through this dungeon and try to find her cart and stop the creatures from invading our world. So there's some really great story text around setting up each of the chapters and what you're going to be doing. I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I'll give you a little bit of flavor of a couple bits here and there, but I don't want to spoil too much of it for you when you get this game and are able to dive into it. So, but the story is definitely rich and engaging. At least for folks who love story-driven games, this definitely has that going on. So you'll find the different tiles as you search, and there might be story elements that tie to each of them. But back to our cards. So we first have our exploration phase, which is phase 1. So the first thing you're doing is choose an unexplored path. And this is where some of the story elements are going to come on. So in this case, we pull tile 10A, and from there we read the story bit. The whole underground structure is well fortified, but parts of the tunnel have crumbled, and it is slow to climb over the debris. You wonder how anyone could have moved a cart beyond this way. As you slide down some rocks, you find some remains of an ancient trap. While the components are unusable, you are able to reconstruct the workings of this trap. You unlock the rune trap on your party sheet. So oftentimes as you travel through the dungeon, you're going to find unique things like this new rune trap, which is probably one of my favorites of the traps. Very powerful, but also expensive to get into play and upgrade. But if you can, it just really adds that next level to the traps that you put out there. So I do highly recommend putting as many traps in play as you can afford with resources. So you'll continue your exploration phase, pulling tiles. The next one here is going to be 3A, reading the story elements until one of those elements trigger the next phase, phase 2, the preparation phase. Now, sometimes in the exploration phase, there'll be a timed element that you'll be incrementing as you're searching through the dungeon. As you follow the tunnel, Dara spots something among the debris and quickly moves to retrieve it. "This should help us," she exclaims with a broad smile. Just as you are about to take a closer look, you see some smaller creatures approaching you from the far end of the cave. You pull Dara back and prepare yourself for a fight. So again, this is the story element that's going to trigger the next phase of the round, which is the preparation phase. It even says exploration phase ends, so you really know what's happening here. You get to pull a rare item from the rare item deck, and you're going to get a story token to put on your quest board. So in this preparation phase, it's much like it sounds, you're getting ready for combat. So you can spend resources to upgrade maybe your traps, or you can exchange items between heroes, just gearing up. And there's some fortified spaces. You'll see an icon in the top left corner, and you can even through the course of the game get additional tokens that mark other tiles as fortified as you move through the dungeon. But you're going to be placing your heroes out on one of these spaces, as well as traps, gearing up and getting ready for the battle. Now you're also going to be shuffling up all the monsters, getting ready to spawn them, and you will pull those cards and spawn them on the available spots. Now there's an order of operations here when you spawn. You're basically going to be moving from right to left, kind of. There's a whole grid about how you do this, but you move and do the first, second, third, fourth, and then move over to the other side and continue spawning. It's pretty straightforward after you get into it, but you'll put all those monsters into play, and then you'll get ready for the combat phase. This combat phase continues until the heroes have been KO'd or all the villains have been eliminated from the dungeon. And then you'll move to a reward phase where you get various things, which is really nice. Kind of a reset as well for the top of the order where you go back to exploration. In this combat phase, there are no dice, so monsters are going to move or attack. Generally not both. and they do have a preferred target as they move. And obviously all of them are going for the gate. They want to get out of here, destroy the gate and get out. But in general, they do have targets that they're going after the heroes, or it could be traps, or it could be specifically the gate. That's their main target. But either way, they're all going to be moving ever closer to the gate room, so to say, to try to take it down, take it out. And along the way, they're going to be taking out traps and try to take out the heroes, and you as the heroes have to destroy them for sure. But again, there's no dice rolls, so it's just a damage. If they do damage, you might have a shield that blocks it, but it just gets through and you mark it down on your player boards. And when you do damage to them, you do the same thing, it just marks down. Now there are some different requirements around damage for different types of creatures, but in general, you just do that damage and mark it off on their sheets. So the phases here within combat, the villains are going to go, and if they have like a bleed effect on them, which can happen, they'll continue to take damage to the round, but it's after they activate. And then traps are going to activate, and then the heroes get to activate, and then you go back to the top where monsters are moving and or attacking. So as a quick example, in this first starting combat round, all the monsters are going to move one space, and that's basically all they're doing, unless, like the Wraith, they have a fast keyword, which allows them to move and attack. But we're going to move over to the Kobold Trapper, because he has this unique ability to ignore traps. And that's what's going to happen after they move. All the monsters will have moved and the traps activate. But in his case, it doesn't do anything. And his ability also can trigger traps where the heroes are and cause them to have damage. So, but that's all he's doing. He's moving, and you can see that he's someone you can get rid of fairly soon because he can really mess with your traps and destroy them, because that's his primary target, even though obviously the gate is always something they're going after. So what you're going to do with Harkon, it is his journey after all. Let's move him first. That's his first action he's going to do, and then he's going to use an overpower to hit the kobold for 3, and you just mark it off on a sheet. Now, there's all kinds of things that could happen with monsters, like they could evade, which means the first attack misses, or they might have armor, but if you have piercing as an attack, it gets through armor, and then every attack in that same attack cycle is going to get through the piercing as well. So it's a really nice way to set up a massive damage for someone if they have armor and try to get through that. Then once you've completed the chapter, you'll move and read the epilogue. And I'm not going to spoil any of that here, but again, that story-driven element definitely persists through everything you're doing in the game. And you hope to be the heroes that come out on top, obviously, and so you can further the adventure and keep moving on and bettering yourself. And I love the fact that you get all these new abilities and things you can add to your player boards, just really enhancing your characters and adding to what they do, keeping track of everything on your player guide and your party guide, I should say. And that really is key, so it helps you when you move to the next chapter, maybe in a week or two when you play again, right? So it's just a nice way to keep track of what's going on in the campaign. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, this was just a brief overview of what's going on in this game, very heavily story-driven, which I really like in games, and it just adds that bit of flavor as you cooperatively work together to defeat the monsters in the dungeon in this tower defense style. The different types of traps you can put into play really help and aid you, but all the abilities you can add to your heroes, fantastic. And if you like dungeon crawls, this might be right up your alley. And I really like how just traps work in general. Using gear and items to level them up, make them bigger and better, and just the different ones you find, the different things you find in each of the chapters as you progress. And you do get that sense of progressing through the story, absolutely. And as you get deeper into the dungeons, there's harder type of creatures, more rare creatures, there's big boss battles that come up, lots of interesting aspects for sure. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.